For 12 minutes, the corridor outside Daniel Mercer's cell inside Black Dolphin Prison was swallowed in digital silence. No static. No flicker. Just a clean blackout between 2:13 and 2:25 a.m. In a facility where inmates were checked every 15 minutes without fail, that gap wasn't a glitch. It was a message. When the cameras came back online, Mercer was still standing in the center of his cell, hands clasped behind his back, posture rigid. He hadn't moved. Hadn't shouted. Hadn't approached the door. But on the concrete floor near the threshold lay a folded note. "You should have stayed silent." The prison warden, Colonel Sergei Antonovich, had spent 27 years inside Russia's penal system. At Black Dolphin Prison, discipline was not philosophy, it was oxygen. The facility housed some of the country's most dangerous offenders, men sentenced to life, men who would never again see a city skyline without bars in front of it. Antonovich believed in procedure, in reinforced steel, in cameras layered over cameras. He did not believe in coincidences. The internal investigation began within the hour. Technicians inspected wiring conduits. Backup generators were stress-tested. The central server room was sealed and examined for external breaches. Officially, the blackout was blamed on a temporary power fluctuation. And officially, 3 guards were reassigned within 48 hours. Mercer was transferred to a deeper isolation wing, a block reserved for inmates considered high-risk even among lifers. His new cell had reinforced steel plating, double surveillance feeds, and motion sensors embedded in concrete walls thick enough to swallow radio signals. Yet when Antonovich personally visited him, Mercer looked almost amused. "They reached me faster than I expected," Mercer said calmly. "Who?" the warden asked. Mercer tilted his head slightly. "The people who paid me." Far from Orenburg, investigators in Berlin were reopening financial files tied to the murder of Viktor Sokolov, the whistleblower whose death had initially been dismissed as a robbery gone wrong. A journalist had uncovered documents suggesting corporate bribery tied to Eastern European energy contracts. Days later, she died in what authorities called a tragic fall. Her notes mentioned one name repeatedly: Mikhail Arsentiev. Arsentiev was more than a corporate executive. He had connections stretching across infrastructure projects worth billions, pipelines, energy routing systems, cross-border contracts that depended on silence. Publicly, he denied everything, privately. Intelligence agencies began to dig 3 months before Sokolov's death. Arsentiev's company had been negotiating a critical buyout. If Sokolov testified about inflated contracts and kickback structures, the deal could collapse, costing hundreds of millions and exposing political allies. Mercer had been the logistical architect capable of arranging a clean elimination without leaving fingerprints. Except Mercer had left fingerprints. On purpose. Back in Orenburg, Antonovich ordered a forensic sweep of the new cell. No scratches near the food slot. No fiber traces under the door. No tampered screws in the ventilation grate. "How did the note get in?" he demanded during a security briefing. No one answered. Later that afternoon, Mercer made a request. "I want to send a letter," he said. "To whom?" Antonovich asked. "A British journalist. One who understands leverage." Requests like that rarely left Black Dolphin. Communication was tightly restricted. But international scrutiny was building. Moscow's central authorities were beginning to see Mercer not only as a prisoner, but as an asset. 2 weeks later, under monitored conditions, Mercer dictated a letter. He described Project Dolphin not merely as an operation, but as a contingency structure, a network designed to neutralize threats before they became scandals. He implied that Sokolov had threatened to expose inflated energy contracts tied to state-backed interests. Then he added a line investigators could not ignore: "I was not hired to kill him. I was hired to make sure he could never speak." The distinction was subtle, but critical, and more so. Polish authorities quietly reopened the journalist's case. Toxicology reports, once overlooked, were re-examined. A trace sedative was identified in her bloodstream, not enough to kill. but enough to impair coordination. Her death no longer appeared accidental. Back inside Black Dolphin, tension thickened. Another anomaly surfaced in the surveillance logs. This time, there was no blackout. At 3:47 a.m., Mercer's cell door registered a pressure shift, as if someone had leaned against it from the outside. The hallway camera showed nothing. No guard, no inmate, no movement. Yet the internal sensor had triggered. Antonovich confronted his security chief. "Are my men compromised?" The chief hesitated. The prison relied on regional contractors for maintenance and technology upgrades. Contractors with connections. And in Russia, connections often climbed upward. Meanwhile, Mercer's behavior shifted. He stopped eating consistently. He began pacing in precise intervals, counting under his breath. He repeatedly asked guards for the time. Not because he didn't know. Because he was measuring something. During a secure video interrogation with a German prosecutor, he was asked directly, "Why surrender in Russia if you feared the people who hired you?" Mercer leaned closer to the camera. "Because there is only one place in the world they cannot openly kill me," he replied. "Here, if I die, it becomes international." For the first time, he admitted fear. And fear created leverage. But leverage is unstable currency. 3 days after that interrogation, a senior guard assigned to Mercer's isolation wing failed to report for duty. His car was later found abandoned along a highway outside Orenburg. No signs of struggle. Phone missing. Family insisting he had no enemies. The disappearance was never announced publicly. Inside Black Dolphin, silence was policy. Antonovich began to feel the pressure shifting from beneath him. This was no longer about containing a prisoner. It was about containing exposure. Late one evening, he returned alone to Mercer's cell. "You think they can reach you here?" the warden asked quietly. Mercer stepped closer to the steel slit. "They already have," he replied. Hours later, a secure call arrived from Moscow. Central authorities had decided Mercer would be transferred to a closed investigative facility in the capital for expanded cooperation. Transfers from Black Dolphin were almost unheard of. When Antonovich informed him the next morning, Mercer's composure cracked for the first time. "No," he said. "You don't understand. The moment I leave here, I'm dead. That isn't your decision," Antonovich replied. Mercer's voice tightened. "They don't need to break in here. They only need me on the road." Transport convoys were vulnerable. Mechanical failures happened. Collisions occurred. Prisoners died in transit. Antonovich knew that. But orders were orders. The transfer was scheduled for dawn. That night, Mercer did not sleep. Guards reported he stood facing the wall for hours, whispering numbers under his breath. At 4:12 a.m., the corridor lights flickered once. Just once. Backup systems held. Cameras stayed online. But something had shifted. At 5:00 a.m., guards opened the reinforced steel door to prepare Mercer for transport. They froze. Mercer was lying on the floor conscious, breathing pale. In his hand was another folded note. No blackout. No visible entry point. The message read, "Transport confirmed." Beneath it, a single word. Accident. And for the first time in 27 years, Colonel Sergei Antonovich realized that inside the most secure prison in Russia, control might be nothing more than an illusion.